Alright guys, what is going on? Welcome back to another Marvel Cosmic Invasion video. Now I am super excited for this game, but I wanted to have at least one video where I talk about certain concerns I have. Some of these may be like literally nitpicks, but these are certain things that I personally am afraid of, and I hope these things are not gonna exactly happen, or at least when I play the game these won't bother me as much. So this is only certain things that, you know, I wanna like put out there as concerns I may have, but again, not saying I'm not excited for the game. I'm still very much hyped, but this is just some points that I want to reference. Alright, so the first concern I have, which is definitely not as big of a deal as the second one, I think the second one is like the biggest, like the main idea I have for this video even, would be the length. So TMNT Shredder's Revenge was pretty good in terms of length. It was around like 2.5 hours, I think, which was really fun, you know, for the whole arcade idea. That's what they wanted to do. They wanted like to have an arcade vibe where you just sit with friends, just finishing the game in one sitting. So you can just like sit with friends, play with it, you know, after 1 or 2 hours, you've finished the game, you've beat, you know, the final boss, which I think it's a really cool concept. But in my opinion, I feel like it was a bit too short. Now, the only thing kind of comparing it to is something like Castle Crashers, where I felt like the game was a bit more of a journey. You know, I didn't finish really quickly. I felt like in Shredder's Revenge, as much as I liked the length and I don't think the game should like be too long, I felt like it just finished pretty quickly, and some of the levels I feel like just went by and just gone. Whereas Castle Crashers, I felt like the game was a lot more of a journey. Now, I think Castle Crashers is about around a 7 to 8 hour game. I think it still could work with friends, like playing one time and then just like coming back to it maybe later. I think it can still work. Obviously, it's not exactly the same as like 2 hours. I understand the idea of something like Shredder's Revenge, but for me, it felt a bit too short. For me, the ideal range would be somewhere around 2 to 4 hours. So not just 2 and like finish it, maybe go a bit more than that, maybe 3, maybe 3.5 hours to 4. I think that's much better. Just makes for a more cohesive game rather than something you can like really run through and finish really quickly. So for me, this is like the big concern. I really hope the game is gonna be a bit longer than Shredder's Revenge, not just 2 hours, maybe around 4. That would be perfect for me. Again, if they go for like maybe 6 hours, I think it's still good. Maybe 8 to 9 hours is a bit too much, but for me, that's the first concern I have, it's the length. The second concern, which is the big one, this is the one that I genuinely am kind of worried about, and I really hope we're gonna see things that change as we see more gameplay of the game, would be the difficulty of the game. So in Shredder's Revenge, I felt like the game has a pretty good difficulty curve, right? You start off with pretty basic enemies that could be tough, but at the beginning we didn't really know how to play, so you kind of learn a little bit about how the game works. And like as you go through the game, you get more abilities, and your bosses and your enemies just become a lot stronger. You know, the bosses became a bit more tough, and some of the enemies, especially, you know, those like charging enemies that have like shields, and all the enemies you have to use like heavy attacks for them. You know, all of these just made the game a lot more difficult as you go through it, and I like that. I really like that. I felt like the game, as you go through it, became a much more difficult, and you have to think about stuff more when you played it. So that was really fun. Same thing I feel like for Castle Crashers, right? I feel like certain things were easier, certain things were tough. I think the final boss of Castle Crashers is still one of the toughest bosses I've ever had in a beat 'em up, especially the whole last section where you fight all these different kind of bosses was really tough. So I like that. I personally like the fact that you go to the final boss and you have to struggle, because again, this is the end. You have to like put all of what you learned into the ending. Now, when it comes to Marvel Cosmic Invasion, the biggest issue I have is I feel like there are a lot of things in the game that I feel like just make the game a lot easier, especially if we compare it to Shredder's Revenge. Now, first of all, it's the abilities, okay? It seems like every character has an ability, unique abilities, and a lot of them have like more tools, which is good on the one hand, yeah, right? It makes the game a lot more interesting, but I feel like it's just maybe makes things a little bit easier, right? Like you have abilities to shoot, you know, like projectiles, you can like hit really close, and then all these stuff I feel like didn't really have in Shredder's Revenge, and you had to like get close into the enemy, and that would sometimes make you really vulnerable. So that's something I feel like is definitely a big concern. Another thing is obviously the whole assist tag-in system that they've built. This feels for me like it's incredibly OP. From what it seems from the gameplay trailers, like you every time you're like in a bad situation, you just call your teammate, you know, to do an assist or like switch them, and the fact that you have 2 characters and both of them have, it seems to be like 2 different health bars. Just makes it like a lot more easier to die, you know, like harder to die, I guess. Not easier. So yeah, that's something that's a bit of annoying, you know. Just having the assist, you know, calling your friends, just making more abilities, more easier things for you to get through. It's, you know, something that, you know, I think makes the game a lot easier. Another thing is a lot of characters seems like they have a lot of AoE and, like I said, range attacks, but just again make enemies just less of a threat. You know, I've seen Storm do this like big, probably, or ultimate, literally like half of the map, right? Which you didn't have anything like that in Shred Revenge. Yeah, you did have like their ultimate special abilities, but that was mostly like really small in a specific place when you had to do it. And yeah, again, this is something that I'm kind of concerned about. Now, for me, the boss fights just needs to be a bit more harder in order to like actually be memorable. If we want them to be memorable, they have to make them a bit more tough. Like I said, I think when you fight for the boss, and especially like the last bosses, when you fight for them and they're tough, that's in my opinion what makes them memorable and make you like, oh my god, I actually went through this. So yeah, that's basically, these are my concerns, my big concerns. Obviously these are really small, you know, kind of nitpicks. I still really enjoyed it. Even if the game is gonna be a bit easier, I'm gonna enjoy it. It's just gonna be a bit, you know, annoying, or you know, just sucks, where I'm gonna sit with my friends and we're gonna play it and we're just gonna like bash through it and like destroy everything, just AoEs all over. Like, that is something that I like. Obviously it's I love the chaos, but I wish that some of the bosses would just like put you into your place and would actually be difficult. So yeah, that's in my opinion what it is. Again, this in my opinion could be one of the best beat 'em ups of all time. Obviously we'll see when the game comes out, but yeah, I really hope these things, I'm gonna see them differently, or maybe they're gonna change as the game comes out. Maybe, you know, the actual enemies are gonna be really difficult, so putting all of these abilities and all the stuff we said would make the game balanced. So yeah, that's in my opinion, that's the video, so we'll see you guys in the next video.